Well, he doesn't eat much, so he's not eating.
He's talking.
Yeah. Very well, John. How are you? Loved your record, Harold. The slash thing you wrote. Wonderful. Thank you.
How I'm doing.
I am so. I've been working at children. It's like the whole
But it was the next hilltop from Dorothy Payne. See, where Dorothy Payne lived, that was Carroll Ground, and my grandpa's brother lived in there.
Is that where DeKalb County?
Yes. A mile or half mile north of them on the top of the hill is where it's this land. But where Payne's lived, that was Carroll Ground, and my grandpa's brother Lisa lived in the house there, and on the other side of the road is where they were raised at, my grandpa and the boys, and then that house burnt down.
I said what you, I forgot what you said you liked, but what you said you disliked was girls. No, we don't believe that.
He likes to lie.
Yeah, I think he must have. He didn't know that.
This is paid by the senior class.
Yeah. I thought this was pretty good though. Yeah.
It's 1934.
Yeah. 34.
No, that's neat.
There's more to that story, but I'll share it later.
I'll tell you this number.
I'm sorry.
I'll tell you the number of this.
I bet you can. Two. You know why?
She's a transporter inside the hospital.
Well,
Checking
see,
them in, checking them out, but also.
it was my grandpa's uncle
So she's on her feet right now.
and grandfather that put the phone system in. Yeah, and there was a connection there. And Grandma Mary Ann lived out in the farm, 4 miles north of town. Well, her husband died, I don't know, 34. She ended up with kids living north of town. She said, all the boys were north of town. She said, no, I want to be on the same phone that phone network. And her son Clay said, not Clay Carroll, but Clay Clark.
Oh, you're gonna sit down here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming. This is such a great turnout. We are super excited to do this. We've done one other one. It was in Spiritsville. It had a lower turnout than this, but it was our first one, and we're hoping it continue to get better. The great thing is that we learned so much from you and your life stories and the stories that you share with your parents and your grandparents. And we are recording this so that it will live on and these stories can live on. So we are super grateful that you all came, that you brought things to share. We brought some things from the Historical Society to share that we had of Clarksdale, just, old memorabilia, yearbooks, things like that. There are other things up there. We have a huge sign, which is hanging, and I had my husband hang it, so I did not get it down and bring it. Would have been cool, but I wasn't willing to climb the ladder and try and do it by myself. So we're just super grateful you all came, and we've got coffee and water and cookies and brownies and things like that over there, so help yourself to those. And I don't know, do you want to start, Greg, since you brought a lot of things?
Hope we go around and say who everybody is maybe first.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. So let's start right down here on Kyle, so we'll start with you and come around the table this way so that everybody can introduce themselves. And I didn't introduce myself. I'm Janice Bennett. I'm from the Historical Society.
Start with Jerry.
Yep.
Jerry Goff.
What class?
What class?
When did you graduate?
1997.
Nineteen.
I'm trying to gain a few years, that's okay.
I'm Laura Lee Chambers Goff. And I graduated from Clarksdale in 1958.
I'm Wayne Webb. And I graduated in 1954.
That's right. I know you.
You ought to.
I'm Reverend Buck Cannon, and I would have graduated in 1954, but I was in the Marine Corps. I graduated there.
Wow.
I'm Helen Carroll, and I'm not a native.
I'm Greg Carroll, and I've been around Clarksdale all my life. I'll be 73 in a couple of weeks.
My name is Bud Browns. I'm a transplant. I've only been here 40 years.
I'm Larry Herford. I graduated in '58.
I'm Jim McIntosh, and I'm not from here. I married my wife Betty Lynn Parsons, and I'm a Vietnam veteran.
I'm Betty Lynn Parsons McIntosh, and I started Clarksdale my first grade and then I finished my freshman year here, but then that's when they changed the boundaries in Clarksdale, and I had to finish my last three in Maysville.
So what year did you graduate from Maysville?
62.
Okay.
I'm Danny Norris. I'm originally from Clarksdale.
Nice.
Patrick Hummer, grew up here.
Mike Hummer. That's my uncle. That's my little brother.
Trouble.
Amen.
Kathy Leonard Sprague. I started school the year after Larry Herford graduated.
Way to stick it in, Kathy.
Raised north of town on a farm. So,
Virginia?
Virginia Hopewell Armstrong, born and raised here, graduated from Maysville in 64. Got into school shuffle big time.
John Murphy, I'm with the Historical Society.
Joanne Garner, used to be Iberger. There were some Ibergers in the Clarksdale area. They were cousins of my dad's and mine. And I'm in the Historical Society. I did just move back, and so I've been in the Amity address, but close to Clarksdale for the last 3 years.
I'm a transplant. I graduated East Buchanan High School, Gold Bulldogs. I married Chuck Tripp in '84, and that's when I transplanted to here. I don't know nothing, but I enjoy listening to y'all.
But she was good enough to share the building with us, so we appreciate that.
That's not a problem.
Kyle Bridgman from the Historical Society. I'm from Maysville.
I'm Bev Maltzberger, Historical Society, also live in Maysville.
Joe McManus, Sturtsville, moved up here in 2004. Historical Society, whatever that place is.
Okay, you brought the most, so we're gonna let you start.
Well, as I said earlier, I'm Greg Carroll.
You have to stand up.
I should stand up.
that's why Helen came.
That's right. That's right.
Good job.
Instructions.
I've been around Clarksdale all my life. My folks got married, mother from Sturgisville, my dad from Clarksdale. In 1948, they got tired of fighting over the schools and they went to Kansas City. And but I came back up here every weekend and every summer. My dad was Richard Carroll. I got married in '71 to Helen West, and we've been a resident of Clarksdale ever since. The only people that's still here, that were here when we got married, that fellow there and his wife, Larry and Dorothy Herford. I'm not telling how old they are.
And they're in the same house.
Yes, they are in the same house, which was my great grandparents' house. Most of my information that I've got to share today, a lot of it came from my grandpa, Clay Carroll. He was born in 1901. Was born north of town, about 3 miles. Lived on the highway, and then got married and moved into the town of Clarksdale. He was a trucker for his entire life. I have 2 uncles, great uncles. Ott Carroll, he was born in 1884, and Clark Carroll was born in 1893. They both shared stories with me, and Clark shared with me a lot of artifacts. Helen and I had the privilege of running a business here in town for almost 30 years, and we heard a lot of stories and tales, not near as many as that guy's heard. A lot of the stories we probably don't want to tell. Would you agree, Danny? My grandpa told of a salesman that lived here in town, and he used the railroad to visit all the towns in the railroad. He had a family in Trenton, and he had a family in Clarksdale.
Wow.
We won't name any names. I'll try and keep fact, myth, and opinion separated as I go through this. My grandpa said, in his opinion, the thing that really brought Clarksdale to this location, and one of the things, there's several things Clarksdale is noted for. You tell somebody you're from Clarksdale, and there's a good chance they're going to identify to one of the couple of 3 different things. One of them, Clarksdale sits on a huge aquifer, just an incredible amount of water. And there are several springs in this area. And there was a trace road that went from Sturgisville over to Boxford. Now Boxford was a community about 4 miles northwest of here. And it went right on the north side of the house up here, or north side of town in our house. They're kind of fitting in with that. There's a pretty good size, significant cemetery about a mile outside of town, back out in the woods up there. It's called the Silver Cemetery. And that attributes to the traffic that went through there. Virginia?
There's a trail on my grandfather's farm, James's farm,
Yes.
on that bluff. You can still see where the wagon tracks were. You don't.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And that, as Grandpa said, it's the roads and the railroad that led to Clarksville becoming established here. In 1885, Joseph Clark and his brother John, they laid out this town. The first schoolhouse in this town, the building directly north of this church, was the first schoolhouse. It sat at the east end of the lot, and then it got moved to the front of the lot. I don't know when it became a residence. Also significantly, that vacant lot right south of here is the last central office that was here in Clarksdale, where, as we was talking, Calabasset, she'd bring your calls. Yeah, yes.
I can add to that, Calabasset was my babysitter when I was a little girl, and used to sleep upstairs, and I used to go down and sit at the bottom of the stairs and watch her on the switchboard, and I so wanted to touch it. But I knew better.
The few facts, and I don't want to bore everybody with these, because they're all on file at the Historical Society, but Clarksdale had a canning factory, a brick kiln right outside of town, a sawmill, a hotel. There's a photograph of the hotel over there. It was a 3-story structure. It burnt twice. In 31, it was rebuilt in 35. They had a cheese factory. There was a lot of businessmen here in town, and I've got a 1897 plat book, and it lists all the businessmen here in town. And the Clarksdale they became electrified in July of 1912. The Durant brothers, let's see here, William and George Durant, they got a hold of 2 DC water-cooled generators, and they were located right behind what was the bank. There's a tin shed there, and they ran those generators, and they ran them every night, and they would run from dark from sunset until 11 p.m. And at 10:45, they'd blink the lights, and that was your signal that the lights was going out. And on Wednesday morning, they'd run the generators from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., and that was for the ladies to have electric washing machines. They could get rid of the one-cylinder gasoline engines. They could have an electric washing machine and an iron. So, you know, that was exciting. I could just see it in everybody's face. On that same line, along those same lines, the city of Sturgisville didn't have electricity. Town fathers came over to Clarksdale, and they talked to the Durant brothers, and they said, would they consider electrifying Sturgisville? So they ran a line cross country from Clarksdale to Sturgisville, and that's when Sturgisville was first electrified. Now, an interesting fact about that, through the evolution of, and I can start with St. Joe Light and Power. Some of you, Danny, you're a lot older. I don't know what was there before St. Joe Light and Power.
Candles.
Yeah. St. Joe Light and Power, Aquila, today it's Evergy, and on their transmission maps, that line is still in existence today. It feeds one of the zones in Sturgisville, and on their transmission maps, it's called the Durant line. So that's where that came about. In 1899, Henry Clay Clark, that's Joseph Clark's son, and Henry Clay's son-in-law, John Carroll, they introduced the first telephones to Clarksdale. And it evolved in about a 10-mile radius of town. And in 1908, the first toll calls to St. Joe could be made. And that was from here in Clarksdale. I've got a part of a wooden box over there. It says, you can see it, it's right beside an old crank phone. That wooden box is what the original phone, thank you, Beulah. That wooden box is what the original phones were in when they came to Clarksdale. And Henry Clay was my grandfather's uncle, and John Carroll was his grandfather. And anyhow, those wooden boxes accumulated, and they were given to my grandfather. He made beehives out of them, and there's one of those on display out at the Historical Society.
It's well built.
Yes.
You know, it's
yes. And I know you'd like to hear some stories and tales like that. Gerald Clark was, yes, Virginia.
We have, I don't remember what year it was, back in the 50s, my brothers cut down a tree behind the bank where the electrical plant was, and they saved an insulator that had grown in that tree.
Yeah. That's where the power, well, until the building was there until, I don't know, 80, 85? Yeah, the old building was there until then. One of the men, instrumental here in town and had quite a history, his name was Gerald Clark. He was Henry Clay's son, Joseph Abrams Clark, grandson. And I can't give you a date on this, and I was going to look up Gerald's birth date, and I didn't get that. I couldn't find it in the paperwork I had. I've got it, I couldn't find it. But when they were little boys, when Gerald was a little boy, he and two of his friends, they had a swimming hole down here in the creek. And that, it was a lot of fun, but the water got up and a tree washed in that swimming hole. Now, about the same time, a place called the Ballast Pit. We'll talk about that a little more. But the Ballast Pit was in operation. And now, what the Ballast Pit was, when the railroad went through all the way to Trenton, for the roadbed, there was a mineral in that area down there. It's west of town, about 2 miles. There's a mineral that when it went through the kiln, they could use it in the roadbeds on the train, and they quartered it there. I'm going to say, help me out, Murray and Danny, I'm going to say the ballast pit was what, a half mile long, quarter mile wide in its inception?
Probably.
Yeah, it was a big place. Well, Gerald and his two buddies, this tree had washed in the swimming hole. So they took their wagon, and they went down to the ballast pit, and probably wasn't even locked. They just decided to borrow a case of dynamite. They got a case of dynamite, and they put it in the wagon, and they brought it back up. Well, now, today, dynamite isn't the most stable thing. But they brought it back up, and they thought they knew what to do, and they put all that dynamite around that tree trunk, and they set it off. And first off, where it got set off, there's a hole in the creek channel there right now. It's in the old creek channel, but there's a big round hole there. That's where the dynamite went off. When it went off, it broke every plate glass window in downtown Clarksdale. And of course, mothers are, where's her children, what's happened, and they started looking around and counting noses, and well, pretty soon, sheepishly, you're seeing three little boys up the hill, and the story came out. So, Gerald, on the note of Gerald Clark, he was quite the businessman. He'd had a farm outside of Clarksdale, and he lost it during the Depression. And he came to town. His father had the drugstore here in town, Henry Clay, and Gerald took over the operation of that when his dad died. He and Norbel, his wife, and Gerald was quite the entrepreneur. And during the Depression, he wanted to do something to bring people to town. And it came upon him to do free picture shows on Saturday night. And they did free shows in the city park there, and had popcorn. And I don't know if they charged for the popcorn or not. I don't know. But they had brought people to town, and that's what they was trying to accomplish, was to get people to town. And yes.
They tried for the popcorn monopoly.
Okay. Well, I didn't know, Buck. So that, I knew Gerald.
When they first started, it may not, but they did.
Gerald, I can say this because I'm a descendant of the Clark family, but the Clarks were eccentric. I'm going to leave it at that. The Clarks were eccentric. And I've got quite a little bit of information over here I'll share with you in a few minutes. But another person that led to helping Clarksdale was a man named Herman Weiner. He was of Jewish faith. He ran a grocery store here in town. And a real good friend of mine, Harry Schwalm. Harry Schwalm grew up in Clarksdale and moved away. And I had the privilege of knowing him all my life. When I lived in Kansas City, Harry lived about 3 blocks south of me. And he helped me stay out of trouble. But Harry worked for Herman Weiner. He said that Herman Weiner during the Depression could also want to bring people to town. So Herman would order a carload, and I'm talking about a box car. He'd order a carload of a product. He'd order sugar, have that, and he would put that on sale at cost. Now because he got a carload, it came to him freight free. He sold whatever the item was. Maybe it'd be sugar, it might be flour. Harry named off a lot of different things, and it's not like he did it every week, but routinely he would have product, and it would be down on the side. The boxcar would be on the siding down here. Clarksdale had the main line, and there were 2 or 3 sidings. I don't remember how.
Three tracks.
Okay, 3 tracks. 1 main line and 2 sidings. Okay, they put the boxcar on the siding, and they sold product. They wouldn't sell it on the boxcar, but they kept restocking the store. And of course, people would come in and buy the sugar, and when they did, they might buy something else. And that was the whole goal. Now, one of these stories that maybe ought not be told, but I'm going to share it anyhow, because I don't think anybody knows. I don't think Herman Weiner has anybody. Harry said that Herman had a tendency of keeping an item sitting by the checkout counter. Might be a broom, might be a box of stick matches. But he had a habit of keeping that there, and everybody that went through bought that. And if they noticed that they didn't get the item, he'd say, "Oh, well, I thought you wanted that." Yeah, that's from Harry Schwalm. Honoring us, was full of orneriness, and Dan, like I say, Danny and Larry, they know more stories than I can even think about telling. But
They've been sworn to secrecy.
I'm sorry.
They've been sworn to secrecy.
There was a fella. He liked his alcohol. His name was Louis, and he had a job of sweeping out the bank, and behind the back of the bank, and you can still see where the entrance door was today. It's at the south, on the east end. They sold caskets. I don't know the correlation between the bank and caskets, but they sold caskets. And poor old Louis, he's in there and he's sweeping the floor, and somebody crawled in one of them caskets and pulled the lid down and stuck a piece of pipe out. And old Louis is sweeping the floor, and somebody goes, "I want Louis! I want Louis!" And they heard the door bang, and Louis was gone. There was a blacksmith down at the south end of town. I have no idea who this was, but men be in bed. The blacksmith shop, pretty good sized building, dirt floor. Men be in bed whenever they had to relieve themselves. They kind of went to the back of the shed and they took care of business, and on the dirt floor. Well, the man that ran it, he asked him, please be don't be peeing on my metal back there. Well, nobody paid any attention to him. He put a hot wire on it. He solved that problem. There's the FBI came to town once upon a time. They were investigating for counterfeiters, and what it was, some of the locals, and I think this might have taken place down there in the garage, down the way I got it, Mr. Farrington's, but I may be wrong on that. They made a set of plates, and what they were counterfeiting was nickels, so they could run them in the slot machine. But the FBI came to investigate that. On the note of slot machines, Harry Schwalm, there was a bar. There was a tavern there in town. It was kind of right north of the bank, and Harry Schwalm was tending bar. And the man that owned the bar was Gerald Clark. Harry was working for Gerald. And Gerald had a slot machine in there. And in order to have the slot machine, you was supposed to pay, I think today they would call it protection. But Gerald didn't do that. And Harry was in there tending bar, and a car pulled up in front of the door, comes to a screeching stop, and two men jump out. One of them's carrying a double-barrel shotgun. The other one walks in and he picks up the slot machine and carries it out the door. I asked Harry what he did. He said, "Let him have it."
Yeah.
That the half slab. It's the old highway. It surrounds Clarksdale out here. That old half slab. I think everybody pretty well has discounted it. The township really doesn't want to claim it. The state highway department has claimed about a half mile of it over here, and they've totally oiled over the top of it with old highway. But if you look at the seams in the asphalt, those were the seams. The cement's still underneath there. But it's very prevalent if you go north of the junction there at O and P, and if you down at Main Street, if you go west on out to 31, there's about a 3/4 of a mile section of it. And that highway went in 1929. Now, what's the importance of it? What's its relevance? Well, it was what the state called the Farm to Market Road. In 1993-94, the city was putting in sewers, and we had a lot of grant money. In order to, one of the requirements of that grant money, in order to fulfill our part, we had to conduct what was called an archaeological, historical, cultural study. And the city paid over $20,000 for somebody to walk through town with a clipboard. And they made their notes as they went through. And then they revealed their findings, and the only two things they found of historical significance was the half chair. You got that? Thank you. Go right in there. There was two things they found of historical significance. One, right on the edge of town, in the old railroad bed, there's an old cement box culvert. Where the branch, there's a water branch flows underneath it, and that's part of the railroad, and they said that wasn't to be disturbed. The other thing was the old half slab. The state of Missouri finds great historical significance in that. They won't send any money to help support that historical significance. But it is considered an artifact of the town. There's a report, was in the city hall, that's describing all of that. And that was in 1929, though, that the half slab went through. You know, and yes, Virginia?
My grandfather rented his team of horses out so they could work on that road.
Yes, yes. A lot of people in the community felt, and I don't know, it originated down at the junction at 36. I don't know where its terminus was. I don't know if it went north at Oak or went east. Does anybody help me out on that?
It went all the way across the country though.
Six up?
I've got paperwork at home, but I didn't bring anything.
Okay.
This said what they call it, and it needs to be designated what it actually is.
I've heard coast to coast.
Coast to coast, yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't know if that was 6 highway, but I do know that I can state it went from the junction of what was old 36 all the way north to Oak, and I don't know where it went to from there. But as I said earlier, my grandpa Carroll, born in 1901, was a trucker. Yeah, well, roads was a big thing to him, big darn thing. He started out with a Model T truck. His uncle had made wooden doors for him that had isinglass, that in the wintertime he could hang those doors on there and put a kerosene lantern in there, and he would leave to go to St. Joe way before sunup, and when he came home it'd be way after dark. And he said they had to overhaul that Model T engine about every 6 weeks. But you know, the idea that we now have a cement road, farm to market, that was a wonderful thing. You know, it went right beside Clarksdale. You know, another one of the trademarks of Clarksdale, Ray Clinton came to town in 1929. Danny was right behind him. What, 2 years?
We might smack him down.
10 here.
Okay, Ray Clinton came to town in 1929. That's another one of the things that you say. You mention Clarksdale to somebody. You might hear about the water, the aquifer. You might hear about the ballast pit. You might hear about Ray Clinton and Danny, where they get their hair cut. When did you sign on with Ray?
I don't know. That's probably in here somewhere.
Well, anyhow, Danny was a very vital part of it. When Ray retired, Danny took it over and ran it for many, many years. You know, and they always told that they used to tell when the free picture shows was going on, Ray Clinton would be there. He might be cutting hair till wee hours of Sunday morning. Yes, Jerry?
Ray was 53 years here.
As a barber?
Yeah. And on Sundays, I ran or Saturdays, he would.
I came over
I'm
in
sorry?
1970. I owned it in 1970.
Yes, that's when you bought the business.
Yeah.
But you was cutting hair in the early 60s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was cutting hair in the old barber shop.
Yes.
Down there, south of your old.
Yeah. The floor where Ray stood, that was part of Helen and I's business. And where Ray's barber chair was, my toolbox was, I could put it on, it was on wheels. I could roll it to the front door. And the first time I rolled it up there, it fell through the floor. The floor, it's wood tongue and groove floor, 3/4 inch boards. And where Ray stood, that floor was probably not 1/4 inch thick. I had to put sheet metal over that. So, another thing Gerald Clark brought to town, along with these free picture shows, was a dance floor. He had a portable dance floor on the south side of the park down there, and they had dances. And that dance floor, the last I knew of it, Harold Buman's family has it. It's out in the barn there out at Gerald's place. But it's still around the community. It has disappeared, but it's significant in size. It's in sections. Yes, Virginia.
When Herminger had their 100th anniversary, I think they brought that floor out.
Oh, they
for
did.
the dance floor.
Yeah, they sure did. They sure did. Yep. That's why I say it's still in the area. fire protection. The city of Clarksdale, for years and years, they got the fire protection from the city of St. Joe. You know, and a lot of things burned, a lot of fires, and in the early 1950s, when the lumberyard burned away.
1955 when the lumberyard.
Okay,
burned.
yeah, Jerry, you know, good Lord.
Yeah.
Jerry's dad ran the lumberyard.
Yeah.
Well, when the lumberyard burned, the St. Joe Fire Department came out, and it's told, they stopped down at the junction of 36 Highway and 6 Highway, which is just south of town down here. They stopped, and the city of St. Joe wouldn't allow them to come into Clarksdale to put the fire out. That's the way the story came to me. That
Yeah. I think Sturtsville sent some over here.
yeah.
But we sure needed a lot more than we got.
Right, it went to the ground. Well, with the advent of that, that's when Clarksdale decided they needed to come up with their own fire protection plan, and a lot of I would name names, but I'll skip people. I know I will. You know, your dad and you know, Ray Clinton. They all went together and created the Clarksdale Fire Association, and it was funded by a membership to join. And then there was dues that was to be paid, but a lot of people didn't bother paying those dues. On the note of that fire protection. So the story goes, once upon a time, there was a big fire here on Main Street. One of the buildings caught on fire and the city of St. Joe, they came out and they got the fire put out. The building that it was in, that they lost that building, and they lost some of the coal sheds that was out behind the building. Well, Jack Anderson, and the St. Joe fire captain, was reviewing the fire, trying to figure out where to start. And I can just picture Jack doing this.
All I can remember about him was the way he called balls and strikes.
Well,
he didn't satisfy nobody.
Jack and the fire captain, they're walking down through the alley and they're going through the ashes, and one of the things that happened to burn was the outhouse. And they both stepped in it.
Oh!
So the story goes, they put them out in the middle of Main Street and they hosed them off the fire truck. The Furman Winder gave them a new pair of bib overalls. John Brand. A lot of people don't know this. He started in Clarksdale.
He did.
And he started very humble beginnings. He wasn't the affluent person that maybe many people know John Brand is today. He was a good friend of my grandfather's. And when John Brand moved to Maysville, Grandpa moved him. John Brand painted his house for doing that. And there was other things that John helped him with. And in 1987, when my grandmother died, we were sitting there, and Pete was taking care of business, and the funeral was over, and we were paying the account, and John came in the room, and he said, in John Brand's way, he said, "Where's Clay's portion of the bill?" And Pete hands it to him, and John goes like that, throws it in the trash. So there's a marker in the city park over here, big granite marker. It's dedicated to those that lost their lives in World War II. John and Jean donated that to the community. Things that need to be pointed out, and I'm about done. I mentioned the water aquifer, the spring that's here. The ballast pit, it was noted after the railroad got finished, it filled up with water. There was duck hunting that went on down there and fishing, and there were people from all over that came out and used the ballast pit. Right now today, there's still a little body of water down there that I know you can walk across if you could wade through the mud. And a little story about the ballast pit though. My Aunt Phyllis was born in 1925, and the kids all used to go ice skating down there. And there was big snow, so they wanted to go ice skating, and Washington Township had a pull-behind grader, the first grader they ever got. And they took it down there, and they took some horses, and they took out there on the ice, and they they pulled that grader around off enough to get the snow cleared off so that they go ice skating. They didn't bother to take it to the shoreline. It's still down there. Of course, the free shows, Ray Clinton and Danny Norris, and above all, the water. And it's only fitting in roughly an 18-month period, this community lost its school, lost its grocery store, and lost its bank. Now the bank, Clarksdale Bank closed, and the next day the United Missouri Bank opened up. So it's a little misnomer to say that we lost the bank, but we lost the Clarksdale Bank. The Clarksdale Bank, at the time, it had, 3 loan officers and 4 or 5 tellers, and it was a big darn deal. And prior to that time, on Saturdays, both sides of Main Street was filled with cars. And in a year and a half, the school, the grocery store, and the bank was gone, and that was kind of the beginning of the demise. Now, as my grandpa said, the thing that contributed to Clarksdale was the roads. Before his death, he also said the thing that is the demise of small towns is the roads. As I said, I grew up in Kansas City and was in Clarksville every weekend over summer. People didn't go to Kansas City. People would ask me about Kansas City. They went to St. Joe, maybe not routinely, but St. Joe was not too distant. I made reference to this man earlier, Ott Carroll. He was born, I think, 1884. Ott Carroll, he lived where the present day Lions Club is. There's a vacant lot right west of it. That's where Ott lived. And in the summertime, he and several other people would be out in the front yard in these little iron chairs watching things. And my cousin and I, we'd be up here, and we were notorious for riding go-karts all over town. And I can still see Ott sitting in his chair. And I'd go by and he'd go, give me this hand signal. And that was my cue that I need to come up there. And I would, I'd go up and sit down and visit with Uncle Ott. Uncle Ott never had any children, and his wife Ethel had passed away years before, and family was family to him. But he shared the story with me, and I'll never know another person like this. He said that he had never been any farther from home than a county that adjoined DeKalb County. That's the farthest he'd ever been. And he wanted me to talk to him about Kansas City, wanted me to describe to him about the bridges and the tall buildings, and he wanted to hear about that. But as Grandpa said, it's those same roads. Well, in the 50s, 60s, people didn't go to Kansas City maybe once a year. It was a big darn deal to go to Kansas City. Today, it's nothing to get in your car and go to Kansas City to have supper, or if you want to go shopping or buy a car or whatever you want to do. Roads builds communities and roads destroys communities. Last and most fitting thing is public water supply district number 1. That's the next thing. You say you're from Clarksdale, there's a lot of people who will say that's where PWSD number 1's at. And at the last I knew, it was the largest water district in the state of Missouri. I can't quantify that statement today, but I suspect that's probably still true. But it's interesting, the original thing the town was noted for was water. And the kind of the last thing we're being noted for today is water. I've got a lot of things over here for Clarksdale. I've got there. Get a chance, look at them. Appreciate. Don't handle them. There's a letter there, and I want to talk about the Clark family. The Joseph Abrams Clark had a son, Ben Clark. Now Ben Clark became the owner and president of the Colorado State Bank in Denver, Colorado. And last I knew, the family still has that bank. Ben Clark, I think the date was 1927, when the Clarksdale Bank failed in 1927, he wrote a letter back to his sister, and with all the remorse. And you feel free to pick that up and look at it. It's a document protector. And right beside it then is a poster that the FDIC in 1985, when they closed the Clarksdale Bank, they posted them all over town, telling about the closing of the bank. There's 2 letters of closure over there for the Clarksdale Bank, and they're both there. There's a wooden box, the side of the wooden box. That is what I think I mentioned this. That's what the original telephones came in. The wall phone was from my grandparents' home. I got to talk on that as a little kid. And Jerry, can you expound upon that just a little bit? What you're sharing with me?
And my dad owned the lumber. Yeah, and I actually were started Chicago lumber originally, and at that time, the number of the telephone number was 2.
Number two. That was my grandparents' number. Yeah, Jerry remembers that. Now, I want to show you a couple things. I'll bring them over here. I got a story for you you're not going to believe. I've also got, here's a picture, here's a photograph of Joseph Clark's home. He lived, at the time it was taken, they said it was a mile north of town. Today it's just about a quarter mile north of town. Let's take this. Yes. I didn't, now this is, I'm going to be very diligent to separate fact, fiction, and myth. Okay, fact, Joseph Clark had a son, William Clark, and he went to Stewartsville in the 1800s and had a drugstore there. Now, in the middle of the night, William Clark left town along with their housekeeper, never to be heard from again. Now his twin brother, Uncle Ben, went to Stewartsville, continued to run the drugstore, and eventually closed it out. But that was his twin brother, Uncle Ben. Now, word began to come back that the family was hearing about a gentleman out in Montana, a senator, William Clark. And they thought that maybe that was the William Clark that was from Stewartsville. Hold that a minute, I don't want to fall.
Okay.
Now, fact, this is Goodspeed's book. It's the history of Andrew and DeKalb County from 1887. I won't pass it around, but there is a story in here. I got up here with it. Here we go. On page 555 in DeKalb County, and it's talking about John Clark. This is William Clark's father. After completing his education, he engaged in teaching during the winter months for about 13 years. In 1865, he immigrated to Missouri, and the same year joined an expedition against the Indians and crossed the plains to the Tongue River. When you look on the map where the Tongue River is at, that just happens to be in Montana. And that just happens to be where Senator William Clark's at. And Senator William Clark had become one of the richest men in the world. And this was on the front page of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch on February the 14th, 1926. Now, when William Clark left Stewartsville, he abandoned a wife and 3 daughters, and that's horrible. That's horrible, horrible. But no one ever knew or told what happened. The mother, when she heard of this Senator William Clark in Montana, she did not want to pursue any course of action. And when the girl's mother died, they filed a paternity suit, and this tells all about it. And it's kind of interesting. Front page of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It's talking about Clarksdale, it talks about Stewartsville, and it tells the story. A lot of folks say it wasn't the same man. Many people say that. And I'll have this over there. You can certainly look at it. Thank you, Beulah. A little other note about Senator William Clark. In fact, on May the 16th, 2005, let's see here, dressed in a cowboy hat and vintage clothes, Mayor Oscar Goodman kicked off a mock auction by taking on the persona of former Senator William Clark of Montana, who founded a railroad depot where the city now lies. On May 15th, 1905, an auction was held to bid on 110 acres or 1,200 lots to build the town. That little town out there, they call it Las Vegas today.
Oh.
So, that's fact. Yeah, that's fact. Not fiction, but I've got several correspondents over there. William Clark's twin brother was Uncle Ben. And Uncle Ben moved to Denver. He had the means to start the Colorado State Bank. He had, and I have this, he had an unnamed person helping him. He never would identify who it was. But this is a ring that was made for their sister, Mary Ann Carroll, my great-great-grandmother, from silver from their silver mine. It's an interesting story, but that's where it came from. There is a very good book, if you like this sort of thing. It'll quantify a lot of things I've talked about. You must understand, Joseph Clark was one of the 50 most wealthy people in the world. And there's a book, I can't tell you the publication, I only had it a year or two. The publication is of recent, 2013. It's called Empty Mansions. And it's about Senator William Clark and his descendants. And he absolutely, there's even a couple pages in there devoted to Stewartsville, Missouri, that a paternity suit had been filed and it didn't amount to anything. But you got to remember, when you're that wealthy, you can make your own history. You can change history. But I've shared fact with you. I've shared fiction. I've shared opinion. So that's all I've got. I'll take these things over there.
That could do DNA.
Yeah, that's great. I know I'm going to make a whole presentation out of just that and a little bit of history out of that. I sure appreciate that.
That's the article.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed when you guys were talking is a lot of you said you were part of the Clarksdale School, and I wondered if anybody wanted to share a little bit about the Clarksdale School and memories that you have of that, or teachers or people that you all knew, things like that.
And we do have some of the old yearbooks that we brought.
You want
from
to
the
spark your memory?
Historical Society.
I'd like to tell a couple of stories about this town. In 1942, I was getting ready to start school. We lived out between here and Amazon. Rosecrans Field was a military base in that day. One morning I was out checking an old hen my mom had set, and I was just a kid. And this airplane, this B-25 bomber, come across, sputtering like crazy. But I was used to John Deere tractors, so it didn't bother me too much. Pretty soon I seen it go into a spin. It hit the ground about the mile where I was at, the whole ground shook. And it blew everything up. These B-25s held 40 gallons of oil in each engine, plus about 3,000 gallons of gas. It blowed in. It was about, I guess 5 or 6 days later, my granddad took me up there to look at it. I picked up some pieces in an oatmeal box, and I got home with them, and I put them up to my mom. And 2 days later, they started smelling. I went and looked, and then I had a piece of one of them in. It blew them into little pieces. This is a true story, I see it. But my other story I wanted to tell, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a lot of gold buried not too far from here. During right after the Civil War, down by the Malice Pit, there was a bunch of Confederate soldiers. The war was over. They stole a lot of money from the government, Southern government. And they were coming up there with mules with us on there and horses, $100,000 of it. And some of the farmers took after them and they chased them over to a farm that's called Bertie Cornelius' farm, if you know where that's at. Bertie's granddad, I guess, would have been one there. And these farmers caught them and they killed them all. They buried them, and donkeys, and the whole men and all in one hole. It's still there today. And I know my uncle, Gene Kern, Harold Kern was in World War II with Bertie's boy. And so he got to know him pretty well. He was with his boy when he got killed. Bertie's boy got killed over there. Then he come back, and I had bought a metal detector there years ago. And Harold said, let's go over and see Bertie, let's look for that gold. He run us off. He said, you boys can't come near that stuff. And it's still buried over in the hills. Over $100,000 of it.
That was across from his house, wasn't it? You know what you told me?
Right across from his house, yeah. Bertie was quite a guy, you know. If you go to his farm now, it goes out through here now. You get over there where there's a road that goes east. Well, there's another road just in his pasture that goes east. Got a fence down there. You know why that's there?
Maybe it's on the road.
He wanted to get that gravel and nobody to go in with him, so he built his own road.
Yes.
Bertie was quite a guy, I guess.
I used to go with my dad there to get hay.
Bertie was a nice guy.
And he absolutely loved me as a little girl. And my dad, when it was time to go get hay, because my dad and him didn't really get along real well, but my dad had said I had to go with him. So I'd kind of entertain him and talk to him because he liked me. So I always had to go to get hay at Bert Cornelius'.
He was something else.
Bertie came to get his haircut one time. While he was waiting his turn, I went out to his car and turned his radio up real loud. And he got his haircut and he went out and turned that on, you could hear him.
Bertie finished his days, something kind of happened, but he was out there on the gravel road and he stopped 2 or 3 people and held them to gunpoint, and Gene easily had to come and defuse the situation. I don't think Bertie ever got to go home.
There used to be kind of an old well out there outside his house somewhere in a pasture. There was a highway patrolman said that's where Bert had buried some of his stuff around that well.
Bertie had a son who was in the army with my uncle, Harold Kern. And when Bertie's boy went in the army, he said, you know, SOB, I hope you go over here and get killed. I mean, he didn't want to go. He got out. He didn't want to. But anyway, he got killed. I guess that had to affect him the rest of his life.
You mentioned Easley. Is that a sheriff or a?
Yes.
Okay.
He had a 100-year-old house over there, on,
Oh,
oh, yeah.
oh, or Jay,
I was gonna say it's
Yeah,
Jay.
Jay, yeah.
We're on O, so
You're
it's-
on it, yeah, Jay, I'm Jay Hadaway, yeah, his daughter's got it.
Yeah, and she's remodeled it. I was in it, it was nice. He always wanted to have people do a big reunion there, but it didn't happen. And, nice house. Yeah.
Isn't that a Sears and Roebuck house?
You know, John?
Not real sure.
I
Built
don't
in
know if he told him.
1904.
The stone house?
That's about right, then. Yeah, that's Stone House.
I'm not sure. We have him in a building memory story, but I'm not sure he told.
No, I'm not either.
Gene never mentioned that.
The time would be about right, but.
And Greg was talking about John Brand. He was in the house that was, let me see, it's a stone house. It's over here on 2nd Street on north of the post office and on the west side of the store. That's where John Brand first was, wasn't it? That one?
I thought he was in the little white house between them. Mom and Dad said he was in that little bitty white house.
Oh, I thought he was in the stone house. I understood he was in Don Pearson's house. He wasn't after he left the other
And then dug out the basement.
Right.
They lived all over town.
I was told that at one time, his funeral home was right across the street from where I live.
That's what I'm talking about. What's Don Pearson?
Oh,
I
okay.
think he was in a couple of places. I don't think he was just in one.
We're just talking about somebody from a different era.
Oh,
You hit the right location.
I've only been here 40 years, I don't know what happened.
You gonna hear when I buried that gold down there?
No,
They have some coffee and cookies up here if you want to.
Yeah,
grab
yep,
a
help
cup.
yourself.
Please. It's pretty good.
I think it was before anybody's time here, because I don't think anybody's old enough, but my dad's family, no, Larry's not even old enough, sorry. My dad's family, they were the Leonard Brothers Band, and they used to play at the park.
Yeah.
And,
I've heard of that.
yeah, my dad played the banjo, and my aunt played the piano, and the brothers played the mandolin and guitar.
On Saturday night, I bet.
Uh-huh.
Who all was in that band? What are their names?
The oldest would be Chester. My dad is Lloyd, Uncle Marvin, and you're on the blank on that.
Their sister, didn't she play the piano?
And my Aunt Myrtle played the piano.
Your Aunt Myrtle taught all of those kids how to play all those instruments.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Well, it's in the historical. They had scarlet fever, I believe it was, and they were quarantined upstairs. This was at Maysville, and they still live at Maysville. They were quarantined upstairs, and so they ordered from Sears and Roebuck or Montgomery Ward's, whatever, all the instruments, and they self-taught while they were quarantined upstairs. And so then,
Sounds like COVID, doesn't it?
yeah.
Does anyone remember the railroad car that's set down there where Daddy Butler's house is, his trailer is?
Mhm.
And they used it for a house for a number of years.
Yeah.
It was a coach, it had windows down both sides, it set north and south, and they lived in it for, I don't know how many years.
I remember Virginia, when that family moved out, I don't know, I was 6 or 7, 8 years old. I'd always wanted a BB gun, and they had an auction. And I went down there, and I came back home, and I had a BB gun. Everybody wanted to know where I got it, I bought it there.
But when the railroad went out, I don't know, when did the railroad quit coming through Clarksdale? When did it go broke?
Late 60s?
73.
Well, one of the reasons, one of the causes of it was the railroad tax. The railroad was taxed a lot.
By the state?
And the city used to get a lot of tax money from the railroad. So when the railroad went out, the city lost quite a bit of money. The railroad went out in the '70s somewhere, 'cause, I went out on the railroad bed and picked up railroad spikes, enough that our Sunday school, or our Bible school kids could make a memorabilia. Well, started in 1886, I didn't put it in.
Yeah, I got railroad ties from Zine Kearns. I went and picked up railroad ties and I built a wall up where Bud lives. That retaining wall going under the basement, that was railroad ties from the old Clarksdale Railroad.
I'm all over that.
Oh, I know. Because I picked up my son was little and I got a stick and I got a baby snake on the stick and I had him go over and scare his dad with it, and your Uncle Zine says, "Did you know that's a baby copperhead?"
You know, I was telling you about that plane crash. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I took the GI Bill, I got a commercial pilot's license. Well, my granddad's the one who took me up there to pick up the pieces of this plane. But anyway, I keep asking my granddad to go for a ride with me. No, he was born in 1881. Nothing to do with that. Kept on one day, I said, "Now, Grandpa, you're not gonna go till your time comes." He said, "Yeah, but it might be your time."
They had a good point.
You didn't think there should be such things in airplanes?
I've been told by, I won't say who told me, that the baseball teams of Clarksdale were pretty good in the day. Is that true?
All but the pitcher. No, he was pretty good.
I just throw a ball behind your back, fast pitch softball behind your back, and you rip over the outside corner. Knuckle curve, we call it.
Now, wait a minute, do I see an N and a Y on your hat? Oh, my.
And they're playing the Royals right now.
Marley. Marley, peace. Marley. Here.
Oh, yeah.
You know her?
No.
Jerry's in this book too.
Are you good? Anybody have a story you've been waiting to tell that you were going to tell today?
I got some I ain't gonna
So, I actually have a question for everybody. My name, we are Joe and Gloria Martin.
I'm Joe.
And, I am, my parents were Dave and June, well, my mom was June White. And my great-grandfather was Emerson DeForest White, who settled here somewhere in the area in the late 1800s, I think. And so the White family had 13 kids. And also, kind of on another side of the family, my great aunt was Leslie Bray, who was the postmaster here, was the first one. I spent a lot of, as a kid, I spent a lot of time out here in the summer with my cousins and at grandma's and at Aunt Leslie's and stuff. And I would, if anybody has any story or anything about the Whites, of course Don Pearson's a cousin and the Swales are cousins, and I used to come out here with my mother, who was a nurse, and Aunt Effie Swales and Aunt Mabel, they're my great aunts. We used to come out and see them all the time. Well, I finally, as an adult, realized that what we were doing was wellness visits. Mom was, taking their blood pressure and their temperature, making sure, because they were in their 80s and I think Effie was 99 when she passed, something like that. And of course, Aunt Leslie was 102, and the last time I was really out here was at her funeral at the church across, at the First Christian Church. Which is what my great-grandfather helped found that church. And
So his name's on the window, right? There's a window in the church for him?
yeah, and there's a window in there for my Leslie's sister, my grandmother, Irene, White, well, Harness White, and my grandma showed up evidently in Maysville on the orphan train. And so my brother and I were all kind of working on the genealogy and trying to, kind of figure out, because nobody knew anything. Because nobody talked about anything. And it's, in Aunt Leslie's family, the Harness family, and so Aunt Leslie and Grandma, Irene, Smiley Grandma. Yeah, I have a smiley grandma and a grumpy grandma. And yeah, I mean, that's what got me into genealogy to begin with, was trying to figure out the Harness family. And the Harness family goes back pre-Revolutionary War. It's like the 1600s. It's like crazy. And anyway, so yeah, if anybody, I would love to hear about, because Dad got a farm up on the north side of town somewhere. It's still there. My brother knows where it is. I was little. Lived here until I was 3. And got water into it. Found an old school lot up there, and with a well, and said, if there's a school, there's a well. And so there was, and they were able to put water into the house and all that kind of stuff. And
How far out of town was it?
it's kind of Esther Ketchum, the Ketchums are cousins. Yeah, so it's out, because they all lived kind of like on, hills next to each other, because the story goes where they used to holler back and forth to each other from hilltop to hilltop.
Next to Ketchum, that's east of town, and Wayne Miller lived there for years. I'm not sure who lives there now. That was
Maybe their daughter,
Burton's lived there before that.
maybe his daughter.
I don't know. But yes, I live on that road too. I did. I grew up on that road. And I've got a story for you. The kids all went to the Pleasant Grove School, which is east of there. It just turned 150 years old, guys. Still there. But the little white boy, and I can't remember names right now, to give you your address, I'm telling the story. They were walking home from school and he was sick, and my mother dropped back to walk with this little guy. He took diphtheria from the bad well water and died. He was about 6, 7, but I don't know. I can get you the names and all the rest of the story.
Cool, thank you.
Well, I was always impressed with everybody's nickname when I moved to Clarksdale. That was a trend. There was a lot. And once in a while, you might hear the reason why they were called that.
You have any good ones to share?
Well, Welton Wilhelm,
Skunk.
Skunk, and
Yeah.
Harry, he's trapped to school. Yeah, Harry Swallow would tell about that.
Harold Kearns.
Who?
Yeah, I didn't know his name forever.
Yeah, that's it.
Just all you knew was Hoot, yeah.
We also had a pig ears.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Donald. You knew his sister named you. That's what I was told, that's what Stella said.
And Eni and Dodo.
Yeah. Yeah, Dennis and.
Dennis and Daryl.
Had a thunder and lightning too.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Who is that? Who is that? My brothers. You saw one, you saw the other. Well, this would be be from another generation, but our daughters, Julie and Kate, were raised in the shop, and especially Kate, she'd go walking up the street, and she'd come back a little bit. Kate, where you been? Well, I went up to Susie Arnold's, and sat on the little pull-out shelf, you know, that talked to Susie for a while, and then, she was up to Danny's, and she was listening to the radio. But Kate went to college at Northwest, and she spoke at what they call a convocation up there about 4 years ago. And what she spoke on was diversity. Now, I would think diversity was basically different colors in skin. I mean, that's what, but her theory on diversity was the fact that she came from a small town, and she talked all about the things that happened in the small town, about going to the barber shop and sitting and listening, and you know, and all the things you do in a small town, walking up to Grandma Carol's and walking back. But she said how different, you know, her upbringing was from someone that might have been raised in St. Louis or Kansas City or, you know, a lot of different places. Nothing like the diversity of Clarksdale.
And we don't have accents here at all.
No, we don't. In fact, in the Midwest, you know, they say everyone that is on TV, you know, most of the national broadcasters, they talk like we do. They don't talk like somebody from the East or from the South. They all talk like we do. So we don't have the accent here.
I can tell a story on myself. The neighbor lady, my mom and dad both worked, and so to go to church here at the Methodist church, the neighbor lady brought me to church every Sunday. And Calabasas, the telephone operator, was my Sunday school teacher. Well, my mom always left me on the dining room table a solid quarter for offering for Sunday school. And we had Sunday school first, and then church was after that. Well, Gerald Clark used to open up the drugstore for a little bit on Sunday mornings for, I don't know, medicine or what. So I put that solid quarter in the offering plate.
He opened it for coffee.
Took out change.
And took out a dime. So I could go down and get a nickel cherry Coke and a one dip ice cream cone at the drugstore. And she'd always say, "Does your mom know?" And I'd sit there and cross my fingers because I'm in church and said, "Yes, my mom knows." Years later, my mom told me that she knew all along what I was doing because Norabelle and Gerald told me. And I thought I was pulling a fast one.
We have twin grandkids that are now 21 years old, but the boy and the girl, the little boy would not let anybody cut his hair. I mean, nobody, parents, grandparents, anybody. So one day I brought him to Clarksdale where I got a haircut. He got up on the deal with the chair with Danny, just sat there, nice as can be. We came here ever since. That's been years ago. And another thing I was thinking about, you talked about the battle spits. We've talked about somebody a while ago whose name has been mentioned several times in this room, but some of the best times I ever had as a teenager was singing in the battle spits. And I'm so old now, nobody cares. But we went over there several times, Third Fork also, with, like I said, somebody's name has been mentioned here. I won't mention it again, but those were really good times. But the haircut with Danny was really good, Danny. And he was very gracious. He even cut the little girl's hair just a little bit at the time.
Did he give him money? He always gave money.
A nickel.
A nickel.
If you sat on the board, you got a nickel. Yeah.
I tried to set arm when I was 15, but he made me quit.
And then the picture was always on the board in the back. Which was kind of nice.
What was that?
The picture was always on the board with all the other kids.
Yeah.
You had a lot of kids you took pictures of.
Yeah.
Haircut, or did haircuts with.
there in the doorway going to the back. I measured their height as they grew older too, and their initials on it.
All of those things were really important to those kids like that. They really felt important.
I remember when, about the last year or so, when Daniel wanted to retire. Well, I was retired, and normally we meet up to the station for lunch. He'd say, hey, come down in an hour or so and sit in the window so they'll think I'm busy. But he also cut my boys' hair. Cindy had the restaurant next door. And Connie and I go over there and eat breakfast. Well, the boys wanted to go over to Dandy's, the barbershop. He had a TV up there in the corner. And he turned that fake wrestling stuff on for my boys. And they'd be down the floor wrestling each other. And I told Dan, if they get too rowdy, just send them back over here. He never sent them back.
That's something to watch.
Huh?
That's something to watch.
Yeah, I guess. I remember. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. My dad's family moved here in '29, and there were 9 of those kids. And the 2 girls were probably in their 70s, and they told the story when the boys would go to the ballast pit swimming, and this probably in the 30s, the girls would sneak down and steal their clothes and run back up the railroad track with their clothes.
Another fond memory I have of Clarksdale is Harold Thornton had the hardware store over here. When we first moved out, we lived in the country, we didn't live here in town. And I was working on that house about every day, so I go to Harold's first and see if he had what I needed. And the boys would go with me, they were just little. And every time we went, he gave them each a 50-cent piece. And if I mentioned going to Harold's, they beat me to the truck.
Talking about Harold Thornton's, I don't know what year it was, he had a bowling alley in the north side, and they were called little duck pins. And I bought these at the auction, I think I got 6 of them. But anyway, next to the Baptist church, they complained they made too much noise. So he found a rubber gasket that fit on there, and then they wouldn't make noise.
I remember going to Harold Thornton's house, and I think him and his wife, what was her name? Ines. They were the first ones to get a TV here in Clarksdale.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And I remember as a little girl, we went to their house, and I sat on the floor and watched TV for the first time.
He sold Hoffman TVs in the store. He sold Hoffman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he did.
I think they were
Got one.
the first family.
Greg, do you remember hearing the story that Gerald, when you went in there and bought anything, you never got a dime back as change?
Yeah, he kept every dime.
You literally kept every dime.
Yeah,
You get 2 nickels back, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And he bought a car
With dimes.
with dimes. But the irony of that is, what he kept was all silver dimes.
Yeah.
If he'd hung on to them.
Yeah.
He bought the car with silver dimes, but he didn't realize the value. Yeah, Harold was.
You never got a dime change.
Yeah, he saved literally every dime went in the register. You're right, Kathy.
Because I used to take out, instead of taking, I say a dime and a nickel, I could take 3 nickels out of the offering plate so he wouldn't get a dime from me.
I remember there at the drugstore, I remember a lot of stories from the drugstore. Most of them I'm not going to tell. But as you went out the door, on the south side of the door, there was a magazine rack. And it had comic books, and then it had some men's magazines. Nothing that you'd rate X. The covers were probably more risque than what was inside them. But we'd be walking out the door. We'd always pause, and Clark would holler, "Now you boys get out of here!"
Remember my mom worked in the beauty shop in the back of the drugstore.
Yeah,
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 That's right. I didn't know that, but
doorbells in the beauty shop, yeah.
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 one time we were gathered in there, and Clark and Ella was running the drugstore. One of the Clarkie that I made reference to that shared stories with me, but we boys were getting ornery, and he ran us out to get out of there. It was the middle of the afternoon, and somebody took an M80 and put a cigarette at the end of the fuse and kind of tossed it back there, the back area back there, and we all went over sitting underneath the shelter house, and there's a great big fan in the transit. And in the summertime, they ran that fan, it sucked air through the store, kept it comfortable. That M80 went off, and I don't know what came out first. There was a huge cloud of dust came out from the fan, and Clark and Ella came out the doors.
I remember when Harold retired, and he came to the Lions Club and said, and wanted us to do his sale.
Oh, yeah.
We carried stuff out of that store
You didn't know what
that was antique, that was still in the original box, the boxes had never been opened.
Yeah.
I bought a lamp holder, brand new, the fastest on the wall, was a kerosene lamp. And no numbers just all over it, but it was brand new, and it fit my lamp that I had as a child.
Yeah, that was, I couldn't believe the amount of stuff we drug out of that store.
At one time, there was a bank there at the hardware store. That's why that wooden frame,
Yeah.
when you went in the door, there was kind of a wooden frame affair, and if you think about it, there was a teller's window
Like a
there,
teller's
and
window.
they had a bank there. And I think it's when I may be wrong on this, but I think it's when the town bank closed, and I think they opened up a bank, but that may not be correct.
There were theater seats there that everybody sat on.
Yeah.
They came out of the Opal Theater too. I bought them.
I got a ticket over there to the Opal Theater.
They're in my garage.
I've got some footlights. My grandpa tore down the Opal Theater, and I've got some footlights from the theater. They're different colors, and the paint has come off of them. But if you look close in there, it says Edison Electric. And, yeah.
I think Oma Davis played the piano for the silent movies too, didn't she?
Oh, yeah,
I don't know.
sure.
I think so.
She did.
I don't remember Virginia. I'm not very
I
sure.
think
Yeah.
Tommy told me that.
I'm sure she did.
Be careful.
I know. I wasn't going to shoot those up at me.
She can just about beat you to the door.
I no doubt about that.
I remember Danny's mom giving me my first permit
Is that right?
in the back of in the beauty shop, and I was under the hood dryer. And of course it made all kinds of noise. I'd never sat under a hood dryer. And I didn't realize, since I couldn't hear anybody, I didn't think anybody else could hear me. So I sat there and sang. And the whole drugstore was listening to me, and I was sitting there just singing, but she gave me my first permit.
Oh, that's neat.
After that, she went to work at the state hospital. And then my dad worked there too.
At the drugstore?
No, state hospital.
At State Hospital, yeah, I remember that, mom did, yeah.
I went through all the underground tunnels.
Yep.
Guys, we want to thank everybody for coming and for sharing all your memories. I mean, this has been fantastic. It really has. So interesting. And so I'll just toot our own horn a little bit. We brought flyers in case anybody's interested for the Historical Society of DeKalb County. And so you're welcome to take these. They tell a little bit about us, and they tell you how to become a member if you're interested in that. It's $20 a year. You get 4 newsletters a year for that, and then discounts on copies and stuff if you come in to do research. We do help you do your genealogy research, and we do not charge for that. We have over 6,000 family files. So there's a lot of information available to you there. But again, we just truly appreciate your time and the sharing of all. I mean, this is fabulous. It really is.
I hope, it sounds like some of you do. I hope you share these with kids and grandkids, and so that, you know, 20, 30 years from now, they'll say, well, I remember
Yeah, so
Uncle
we will
so-and-so
post
telling me this.
on YouTube, and it'll go on our Facebook page, the link.
Yeah.
So, once we get it edited a little bit, it'll go up in a very short time. Joseph?
I
One
talked
more
about my
story?
grandfather, he was born 1886, his name was Aubrey Wright, couldn't hear. And he had to quit school at 3rd grade, his grandmother taught him to read lips. By the time he was 16, he couldn't hear one thing. He rode a blind mare, and they went everywhere. She'd hear something, she'd turn her head, he'd look to see what it was. If they come to the ditch, he'd say, "Easy, Dolly." She'd stop, hit her, and we've got pictures of all 8 of us kids on that one blind mare. But anyway, this hung in his house, and his hat hung on it. The whole time we were growing up, didn't know the story till later, but we had a train stop here in Clarksdale, the next one was Bayfield, the next one was Stockbridge. Stockbridge had a lot of cattle panels, and people drove their cows there, loaded them on the train and shipped them to market. Well, they had a train wreck, killed a bunch of cows, and he was raised at San Antonio, just south of Buck's Church, quarter of a mile, something like that. And so him and his uncles came over to help clean up the cows, and he kept a cow horn from that train wreck. He was about 14, which makes it 1900. So.
Wow.
So where was Stockbridge? Did you say Stockbridge?
Okay, Clarksdale, Bayfield, then Stockbridge, just about the county line.
Okay, so.
Andrew McManus kind of remembers things being there that would indicate where it was. But it was right at kind of, there's about this much in that book, in that Washington Township book on Stockbridge, if you find it.
I think, help me out, Virginia, but wasn't it Aubrey Wright and his wife, they owned a house, 2 houses up here from the Methodist Church. And your dad bought the property and sold that house to Clarence Maple and moved it up there, and it's there today as a garage. But what I'm thinking, when Aubrey Wright and his wife, they came to town with a team of horses. They always came down with a team of horses, and then they mowed the yard and kept that property cleaned up.
Yeah, that belonged to his uncle.
Okay.
And his uncle, he was raised with his uncle. He was just 9 years younger than Uncle John. And John Wright owned it, and then Granddad inherited it from him. And that shed could have been in the backyard. It wasn't a house, it was a shed.
Okay.
But the house burnt.
Buck, don't you have
Next door to
some
you guys.
on history on Jesse James in the area?
Oh, yeah.
Out on off of my road, wasn't it?
Down at Bayfield down here, you know where that's at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They was back, way back there, you know, and there's, I always had some boys around these towns that didn't have nothing to do but aggravate people. And this guy came in to buy some groceries, some supplies, and when he come out, these boys were there waiting on him, they just aggravating him, carrying on, you know. He put his groceries on the saddlebags and pulled out his pistol and laid it across his saddle, and he said, "Now boys, it's all over with now." So they run, and they found out later it was Frank James.
Where was this at?
Bayfield, right down the road.
Bayfield, I don't know what Bayfield.
Dallas Pit Road down there.
Yeah, right
Also
down-
known as
right
Shotgun
down the
Crossing.
bed. That
Yeah.
bed.
Yeah,
Notice what?
shotgun.
Shotgun Crossing.
And then you knew Bonnie and Clyde's.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were,
Yeah, they spent the night out here one time.
yeah.
In Clarksdale?
Out north, kinda out by me.
Out by, about 5 miles from here.
Yeah, out in my neighborhood.
I got a book that was written about Frank James, and it's quite interesting. He rode with Quantrell, you know, during the war. And, Montreal sent him and some men over east of Kansas City to this farmhouse that the Union soldiers were having a party at. And they went over there and they looked in the window and they counted 10 men, 10 women. So they gave the rebel yell and went in. When they found out old Frank was pretty sharp. There was 11 women and 9 men. So he got to checking and one of them, what little clothes she had left on, she took her blouse or her big gown, goes over this 15-year-old soldier. He was a Union soldier. He was just a kid. Well, they took the men out and shot him. And that was the first thing they done. And Frank took this boy and said, "Come on, boy, I'm gonna shoot you." This kid was just begging and screaming, you know. He got outside, old Frank pulled his pistol out, shot over his head, and said, "Now go home to your mama." But when Jesse got shot in St. Joe, Frank went and surrendered to the governor. That's how you did it in them days. And he needed a lawyer. Guess who his lawyer was? Boy. Frank never spent one day in jail.
Well, Frank and Jesse and Fletcher Taylor killed my great-great-grandpa and his brother.
It's documented.
It's documented in many books.
In what?
In Clay County, back in 1854.
They did what now?
They killed my great-great-grandfather. They were bushwhacked. My great-great-grandfather was a northern sympathizer, and of course Jesse was a southern. And they were neighbors in Clay County. It's called Claysville. I don't know whereabouts Claysville, but they were bushwhacked. Jesse and Frank and Fletcher, rode up to their farm one day and they had quite a fight.
You mentioned Clay County, totally irrelevant to what you're saying, and I shared it with John, a lot of people don't realize that when Missouri first became a state, I may stand incorrect, I think there's only 13 counties in the state of Missouri, but Clay County went from the Missouri River to what is today Iowa line.
Oh, really?
Yes, you do genealogy work. My family, with genealogy, it says they came to Liberty Landing and then moved on to settle in Clay County. Well, they moved on, but they moved about 4 miles northwest of here.
Oh, yeah.
Then later on, I think it was 1841, the state, they recounted, we ended up with what, 118 counties, John? Something like that.
Well, they're buried at Holt, Missouri.
Yeah.
They're, around Kearney.
Uh-huh.
That's where they're buried. Killed my great-great-grandfather and his brother. Oh, well.
Did you know Frank and Jesse's dad was a Baptist minister?
I heard that.
Then his dad, after